So Matt Walsh, the guy who made the documentary "What Is a Woman," which is on Daily Wire, I highly recommend you guys go watch that. It's actually a very good documentary. He was recently on Joe Rogan where they were talking about gay marriage. I want you guys to watch this. It's very interesting. And we'll talk about it while going through it. Hey man, check it out.
Marriage is a certain thing, which is the context for procreation, for the building of the nuclear family.
What about people that get married that don't have kids? Are you opposed to that?
This is where it starts. Listen, Joe is about to try to push Matt into a wall, and this is where it starts. What about the people? What about this? What about that? Watch, just let it go.
What if they get married and they decide, you know what, we don't need kids. I'm going to get fixed. You get your tubes tied. Let's travel the world.
Well, what do you mean am I opposed to it? I mean, I think that that every married couple should be open to life.
But what if they don't want to? Are you opposed to them being married? If marriage is only for procreation and to bond a family together, what about people that are deeply in love that never want to have children?
I don't think it's not only procreation, but that is one of the fundamental definitional aspects of it. Of course, there's more to marriage just than that.
And what about people that are infertile? They fall in love and they realize that they can have babies and they don't really necessarily want to adopt. Is that okay for them to be married? Because then you're, by definition, marriage falls into a completely different thing, because then it's a bond of love. It's a union of love.
Sure. I mean, that doesn't change the nature of marriage, though. It's a little bit like I say that what's the definition of a woman? Well, a woman is someone who by her nature can conceive children in her womb and bear children. And then the response is always, well, what about women who are infertile? Does that destroy your definition of woman? And it doesn't, because it's still a woman's nature to bear children. Not every woman will, and there will be disease and infertility and old age and all these things that will preclude that. But it's still of her nature to do so. And I would say the same thing for marriage. I mean, it is natural in a marriage for procreation to occur. It's not always going to happen in reality, though. But that's still one of the natural functions of marriage. And married couples who can't conceive children, there are other ways to be parents, like adoption, for example.
If they want to. Right. Sure. But if people want to be married and don't want to ever have children, are you opposed to them being married?
Well, I wouldn't advocate a law that would prevent it.
But would it change the definition of what their marriage is to you, because they don't want to have a family? They just want to have a loving bond?
I think this would be a couple that is rejecting one of the fundamental aspects of marriage, and that they should be open to life. I would hope that in the future they would be, but
isn't that just a personal choice? I mean, you can have a very
well, the Lord said to be fruitful and multiply. I think people wanting to come together and just be married and not multiply, I completely agree with Matt. You know what I mean? In a way, it's being like, if you can have children and you just don't, in a way, it's self-centered and selfish.
fulfilling life if you just follow your pursuits and your dreams and your interests.
It's God's will for us to procreate. So,
and you find someone that shares those interests with you and you share time together. It's very fulfilling and loving.
Yeah, it's a personal choice, and that I'm not advocating for like a law that says that you if you're married you have to have X number of kids.
But then why are you opposed to two gay people doing that?
Well, because again, it's not about choice. It's about what this institution, marriage is an institution, and what is it, and what purpose does it serve? And I do not agree with tearing down or changing this definition, especially because the people who have changed the definition haven't come up with a new one. So they say, well, that's not what marriage is. So for thousands.
In other words, he's saying they want to corrupt the actual meaning and picture that God has for marriage. In the same way that you have different drag queens and different people trying to teach at a church. They don't want to make their own thing. They don't want to make their own thing. They want to take what's already there and corrupt it and switch it and turn it and put it in a way where it's what they want and it's for them. Why not make your own thing? I get exactly what Matt is talking about.
thousands of years, we said marriage is the procreative union. And then we had the other side that came along and said, well, it's not that. Okay, well then, like, what is it exactly? And I know you said, well, it's people who love each other. Two people love each other. Well, but then why two people? Why do they have to love each other? All these kinds of questions. You get into what if they're in the same family? What if brothers and sisters want to marry? And I know every time that comes up, the advocates for gay marriage will say, well, that's a slippery slope argument. That's a fallacious. But it's actually not. It's like we're trying to get to what do you even think this institution is now, since you've rejected out what we were saying it was. And I've never found a compelling definition. And any definition offered, it's like, well, what's even the point then? Why do we even need this now?
I just don't see how a gay marriage in any way damages a straight marriage. I don't see it at all. It doesn't make any sense to me. It just seems to me that people want to be. Look, if you wanted to look at logic, especially in our modern society, which is pretty when it comes to relationships, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% of all marriages end in divorce anyway. They don't make it. I don't know if anything would damage marriage and damage the institution of marriage is the option of divorce. I don't think gay people getting married in any way, shape, or form changes a bond that you have with your wife. It's just called marriage. It's a human invented thing. If we decide that gay people can get married too, I just don't see how it damages anything. I don't think it tears down the definition of marriage in any way. It just opens up the possibility that people who are gay won't be discriminated against.
Yeah.
God said the two shall become one. Now, if Joe Rogan is talking about like the ring thing and things like that, the material and stuff like that, okay, but the Lord said the two shall become one. That's not man-made.
I don't think that a gay couple existing directly impacts. There's a gay couple and wherever, and I'm with my wife in our house. Like obviously,
right.
There's not. But I'm not talking about on the individual level. I'm talking about on the societal level.
Right.
I would agree that divorce, especially this no-fault divorce, rampant divorce. I don't think it's as high as 50%. I know that's often quoted. I'm not sure where that comes from, but it is high. It's too high. And
Chris Rock has a great joke about that. He said those are just the people with the courage to get out. It's like how many cowards stay.
But it's also true that the advocates for what we call now traditional marriage, which I just call marriage, but the advocates for traditional marriage put themselves at a disadvantage by especially in the churches, like allowing this rampant divorce to occur. And then you've already sort of given up on some marriage is supposed to be monogamous and permanent, as well as procreative. Well, you've given up monogamy and permanence, and so now it's not. That's two of the three legs gone, and so now this assault was waged on the procreative part of it, and it was difficult to withstand it because the institution had already been weakened. So I agree with you there, but my answer to that is to try to reinforce what marriage is, not to just give up on it entirely. And I still think you're left with this question of, like, if marriage is not what I'm saying it is, then why do we even need it? What's the point? I mean, you're saying it's a man-made institution.
Yes.
But you're also, like, the way that you're presenting it, it's a totally meaningless institution. So they don't need it at all.
No, it's not meaningless. It's because it means something to the people that get married.
So it's just a subjective, symbolic thing. I mean,
it means something to the people that get married because of its origin, Joe. If it was never the Lord expressing the importance of two becoming one, it wouldn't be it would be meaningless. So people see that and they see the origin of it, and then down the line, they want their own thing with it. Joe, that's the importance of it because of what God made it. Boy, oh boy.
What?
Yeah.
So if you're
kind of what it is, look, there's a massive responsibility when you're married and when you have children to keep your family together and you raise and keep everybody happy and healthy and there's great reward to that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always work out. It's people change. People are fucked up. It doesn't always work. And so I don't think it should be outlawed because 50% of the people fall apart. Just like I don't think it has any effect whatsoever on a straight couple if a gay couple decides that they want to make it official. And that's what it is to them. It gives them a feeling that they're accepted and appreciated and that they're not discriminated against because they happen to be homosexual.
So, well, what you're articulating to me,
people have free will, right? People have free will. People can do whatever they want to do. But when you start trying to infiltrate things that are already put in place by God is when it's a problem. When you start trying to come into the system and change things and twist things for your liking because of your emotions and what you want, then there's a problem. You have free will. Do whatever you want to do. When you start trying to change things is when there's an issue.
Is the damage that's done by gay marriage to the institution of marriage.
But how is it done? How is that in any way damaged straight people?
Because we are making the institution meaningless.
But it's not meaningless.
Well, but
it's very meaningful to the people that have it.
Subjective, symbolic, and it's about your own personal feelings.
Isn't it, though?
Well, no, I would say that it's not.
Well, if it's not subjective and it's not symbolic,
it codifies and protects and gives a name to a thing that actually exists, which are man, woman couples creating people, creating babies,
but not always.
Right, but that's still the nature of the union. So,
but what are the percentage of people today that are married that don't have children? I bet it's pretty high amongst heterosexuals.
Probably.
Is there something wrong with that?
I think there is something wrong with it.
Joe wants Matt to think exactly like him. He's trying to push him more and more to a corner.
I think there is something wrong with getting married and saying, oh, we're not going to have any kids at all.
But why is there something wrong with that if someone's personal choice? Well, why is it wrong that two people are like, I am deeply committed to work and I don't want to sacrifice any of my career and I don't want to ruin a kid because I'm constantly at the office. But
because, Joe, when you come into a place like that, you are stepping away from God's values. Joe doesn't understand things like this. I don't think Joe's a biblical person. But when you come into the acknowledgement that we are here for a purpose, and in order to understand what your purpose is, you must first find your creator. Just like the MacBook. For us to understand how the MacBook worked, we needed to be told and we needed instructions by the person who made the MacBook. Before we knew how to work computers and stuff like that, we needed instructions on how to work a computer by the creator. I don't understand how this is so hard for human beings to understand. But you have people like Joe Rogan who are so far away from that mindset and understanding that they need a wake-up call. Boy, oh boy, it's sad, man, because it'd be the ones that think that think they have the most knowledge, that be the most foolish because they don't truly know God. This life is not long, people. This life is not long. We have eternity after this. This skin is a container that is carrying our soul for not that long. Some people shorter than others. With that being said, you need to find God. Get your eternity set.
That's where I get deep satisfaction, and that's what I'm focused on. And the woman says, that's great because I don't want children either. I really am attached to my interests and my career and what I like to do. That's not damaging your relationship with your wife and your family. I certainly don't think of it as a threat to my marriage or my family.
Yeah, it is a personal choice.
Right, but shouldn't people be allowed to make those personal choices? Like, isn't that a fundamental aspect of what it means to be American, to have that freedom?
Well, but right now we're not talking about what people are allowed to do. I'm not saying
we're talking about marriage, gay marriage.
Okay, we were just discussing straight couples who choose not to have kids.
Choose, that's also a personal freedom issue, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that straight couples should be legally required to have kids, but I if you're asking me, do I think it's the right choice to just get married and choose not to have kids ever? I do not think that that's the right choice. It's their choice, but people can make choices that are wrong, and you can disagree.
How is it wrong if they have a fulfilling and wonderful life together with that choice? If their thing is that they just want to have a bond between the two of them to just like take it to the next level.
Because that's vanity, Joe. It's vanity. Everything other than God is vanity. People like this really don't understand that. Everything other than God is vanity. So when you are doing things that's not even in God's will, it's really just like, well, what am I doing? You have people that have worked all their lives, that's been focused on their career all their lives. Then they become like 70 years old and no grandchildren around. Spouse probably passed away, or don't even have a spouse because they've been so focused, and now they're just lonely and sick and sad. God knows best, my friend. Be fruitful, multiply, have a family, have true love surrounding you.
But let everybody know, like, we are married. If I die, my money's going to go to Helen. And if Helen dies, I'm going to mourn her because she was my wife and now I'll be a widower. Like, to some people, that distinction gives them peace and security and makes them feel better about the relationship, that they're both so committed that they've legally signed documents that say that they're bound by law and under the eyes of God or whatever you believe in.
Told you. Or whatever you believe in. It's false peace, Joe.
Yeah. They're able to make that choice, but I think you're still rejecting one of the purposes of marriage. And in the scenario that you just outlined, you're also deciding to live a really self-centered life. You're saying,
what if you're not? What if your work is very charitable? What if it benefits humanity in a deep way? What if you spend a lot of time doing, healthcare work and social work, and you're deeply committed to your community? It's not selfish at all. You're just dedicating your time to something other than raising new human beings. But you're dedicating your life to enhancing other human beings that are around you.
That's a hypothetical.
It is a hypothetical, but so is yours, right?
Yeah, but I think most of the people that choose, like, we're not going to have kids, and the rate of those rates are declining, and the age when people first have kids is also going up, and all of that.
Yeah.
And most of the people that are making these choices, I don't think it's because they're involved in charity work. I do think that it is more the scenario you outlined in the first time around, which is just like, well, this is what I'm doing. I have my job. I don't want to give it up.
Yeah. But don't you think that people should have the freedom to live their life in that way? I think human beings vary widely, in a huge way. And I think there's some human beings that find a very fulfilling life just reading books and traveling and experiencing different things and seeing art and doing whatever the fuck they want to do. And they don't necessarily have to have kids to live a fulfilling life that way. And if they choose to do that with someone who they have a loving bond with and who they get married to, I don't think it's a bad thing that they don't want to have kids.
Well, I guess we have to, maybe we're running into a question of now you get to the real fundamental question.
I think it's a fundamental freedom thing.
Yeah, we're not disagreeing, I guess, on the freedom aspect of it, because, again, I'm not saying that you should be required to have kids.
But you're imposing your sensibilities on what you think is important in life to other people. But everybody has a different idea of what's important in life without hurting anyone. The thing is, like,
because he speaks out and speaks truth, this is the issue here. People want people to have the same exact opinions that they have. And even though I'll hear somebody else's opinion and I may not agree with it, I'm not going to try to force them to agree with what I agree with. I'll tell them truth. I'll plant that seed and pray that the Lord does the watering. Pray that the Lord does the increase. But I'm not going to try to force them to believe it. It's in God's hands at that point. Just a messenger. But people like this will continue to try to say the rare situations, will try to beat you into a corner, put you into a wall until you just come into the same conclusion that they have.
What I'm saying is these people that are married, that don't have children, they're not harming anyone. They're not harming these unborn children that they never have. They're not harming anyone. And it doesn't affect your relationship with your family and your marriage at all.
Yeah, but I'm not imposing myself on them or harming them by answering a question about
right.
how I feel about their choices.
Right, but nor are gay people doing that to you.
I think the harm comes from, on a societal level, when we start breaking down these basic central institutions like the institution of the family and of marriage. That's where the harm comes from. And the more that people believe, the more that we build a society where it's believed that marriage is objectively meaningless, right? It's entirely subjective. It's just about making you feel better. The more that we build a society like that, I think that's where the harm comes in. The worse it is, and people are going to reject marriage, and that means more. Fewer kids are being born. Also, more kids are being born in a context where they don't have that stable family structure. So the harm definitely comes. It may not be this immediate, connect the dots thing, but and we can already see that.
Okay, so my take on it is gay marriage is not in God's will. And it's not natural for a man to be with a man. It's not natural for a woman to be with a woman. If it was, you'd be able to procreate. It's not natural. Intercourse between the man and the man is not natural. It's not natural. Nor a woman and a woman. It's not in God's will. And when you get into a space where you want people who are truly walking with God to accept it, you are wanting them to come into compromise and wanting them to say that it's okay what's being done, even if it's not God's will. Now, you have freedom of choice, free will, you have it. But don't ask me and then get upset with what I tell you, because what I'm going to tell you is going to stand on biblical truth. I'm not going to tell you what just stands on my own truth. And that's the problem with a lot of people. They want to talk about what their truth is. Listen, there's only one truth, and that's God's truth. But I'm not going to sit here and bash homosexuals. There's all kind of sin that people commit. Adultery, fornication. It's not just people see homosexual and just want to point at that sin, but it's a lot of different sins that people live in every day. You got parents out here being okay with their children out having intercourse, saying, well, just wear a condom. Well, that's as bad as being homosexual. Fornication is as bad as being homosexual. Outside of marriage, sin is a sin, people. So let's not just try to stick on one thing and just nail that, and then be hypocrites with our own lives. Take the log out of your own eye first. However, I do not agree with gay marriage. I believe it's outside of God's will, and there's no purpose. Once you come into agreement with that, where you're going to be with somebody else that's the same sex as you, you have completely stepped out of purpose. We are here for a purpose. We're human beings here for a purpose, not just to dance around and be in la la land and act off our own emotions and, want to come into our emotions being true. You see what happens when we want to come to a place we want everybody to agree with our emotions. We have men calling themselves women and want other people to do the same, and they get upset when you don't. You got people out here thinking that they're cats and wolves. I hear kitty litter in the bathroom in schools. Do you see what happens when you act off people's emotions? So even though it may seem harsh and seem like it's not good and things like that, when you say things like this shouldn't happen, it's because you're coming out of God's law. You're coming out of God's will. And the more we do that, you see how far we go. where people start calling themselves dogs and wolves. You see how far we go. And what's going to happen is people are going to start identifying as children and start identifying as grown men. So you're going to have a grown man identifying as a child and a child identifying as a grown woman. And then you're going to have pedophilia that they're going to try to make legal. Then after that, it's going to go down to a place where people want to marry their animals. You're going to have bestiality come into play. It doesn't get better. It gets worse when you start pulling away from God's will. And gay marriage is not in God's will. I pray this message reaches somebody. Spread the light, spread the truth, spread Jesus. Amen. I love you guys. God bless you.